was all about UFOs, and they're not telling the truth. They're keeping it all secret. And I said, well, how do you know this? And she said, I can't tell you. And I said, well, how do you know? And she said, because I worked there. And I said, well, why can't you tell me? And she said, because they'll come and arrest me. And at the time, I think part of her reservation in talking to me was that I was the detective sergeant for the Aberdeen Police Department at the time. That's a town about 25 miles away from Ocean Shores. And I think June was a little bit worried that maybe I would arrest her.
And how did you get past that psychological obstacle?
Well, I didn't for 4 years. I gave her a business card, and I thanked her, and I told her I would be really interested in talking to her in the future. And it wasn't until 1997 that I got a surprise phone call from her. And that occurred because of the 50th anniversary of Roswell, and at the same time that the public was becoming really interested in Roswell, and it was all over the news, that's when we got a heavy dose of, well, it was really all weather balloons and dummies. That was all over CNN. And one day out of the blue, my telephone rang, and I answered it, and there was June on the other end of the phone, and basically without even really saying hello, she said, it's a damn lie. And she said, have you been watching CNN? And I said that I had. And she said, that's the same lie that they used before. She said they lied about balloons a long time ago, and they're still lying. Then she said something to me that I've never forgotten. She said, I'm 72 years old. I've outlived 2 husbands, and I've survived cancer twice. What are they going to do? Shoot me or put me in prison? I can do either one. And I'm not that slow, so I said, well, how soon can I be at your house? So I ended up packing up a yellow pad and eventually a tape recorder, not right at first, but I started going to visit her at her home in Ocean Shores, and basically we sat up late at night and had coffee, and she told me her life story, and one time I asked her if I could tape record her, and that, of course, led to a very lengthy interview. The primary interview that I did with June Crane was at her home in Ocean Shores, Washington, and it was on June 27th, 1997, and it occurred at about 10:30 in the evening.
She would have been what age?
72.
And she lived until what year and age?
Well, she died in August of 1998, so she made it just past 73. I'm not sure how much June really knew about the state of her cancer, but she had a document drawn up where she said that she was giving me the rights to her life story. And she never told me that she was going to do that. She just dropped it on me.
Right.
And so I believe that she knew. And that, of course, adds credibility because it's considered universal in any court of law that if a person thinks that they're going to pass away, I mean, obviously if they're going to die immediately, it's called a dying declaration. But just the idea that someone knows that they're wrapping up their life, that adds a lot of credibility.
And what would be the most important information directly related to Roswell, Wright-Patterson, bodies, UFOs, that you heard that night?
Well, she told me that by the time she left Wright-Patterson for the last time in 1952, she said that they were investigating at least 3 crashes of alien vehicles and that there was possibly a 4th. And she did not give me exact locations other than to say that Roswell was one of those. And then there was also an incident where she stated that she had coffee with a man who said that he had just flown from New Mexico and brought in bodies.
Now that is one of the audio excerpts that we have, and I'm going to play it right here.
What was going on behind the scenes at Wright Field between 1942 and 1952 from June Crane, an individual who was actually at Wright Field and participated directly in many of the events that are going to be described. This is an extraordinary report.
Thank you, Whitley. This is a story about 1942 to 52, actually before the 1947 crashes in New Mexico, but certainly goes to the heart of what our government might have retrieved from New Mexico. I heard about this in early November 2009 in Las Vegas at Ryan Wood's UFO Crash Conference, where a former police detective shared a tape-recorded interview he did on June 27, 1997, with a then 72-year-old woman who had worked as a secretary for the War Department at Wright Field, Ohio from 1942 until 1952. Before marriages, her name then was June Crane, and during her work at Wright Field, she held a secret and a top secret Q clearance that would have come through the Atomic Energy Commission. She heard about UFO crashes in New Mexico and retrievals of non-human bodies, and she even held in her own hands a piece of what was called a spaceship metal that she could not cut, and no matter how hard she twisted, the metal would always spring back to its original shape. The police detective who interviewed June Crane before her death is James E. Clarkson, 58 years old, who retired from the Aberdeen, Washington Police Department in 2000 because of a knee injury. Now Jim Clarkson investigates for a Washington state agency in the field of administrative law and is chief investigator for Washington State MUFON. Jim became interested in the UFO phenomena after reading John Fuller's book, Incident at Exeter, concerning 1965 UFO encounters in New Hampshire. Then, after he heard about the November 1986 Japanese airline pilot's report of a huge unidentified flying object over Alaska and radar confirmation by Anchorage Air Traffic Control, Jim Clarkson began to read and study more about the mystery. That led to his preparing programs about the UFO phenomena for public libraries, including one in 1993 when he first met June Crane, then June Cava, after a second marriage.
I gave a program in the Ocean Shores Library in 1993. And there were probably 40-some-odd people there. And when I was all done, this very determined older woman approached me and just looked me right in the eye and said, "You're right. The government knows all about UFOs, and they're not telling the truth. They're keeping it all secret." And I said, "Well, how do you know this?" And she said, "I can't tell you." And I